Welcome to another movie plot. Spoilers ahead. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire sought to enslave 1,000 boys in 1442, training them into bloodlusting soldiers holding no morals or loyalties to anyone but himself. One such boy became known as Vlad the Impaler, after his use of wooden stakes to display those he killed as a form of psychological warfare. Having reached their highest ranks, Vlad was able to retire from his duty as a soldier, being made the prince of the Ottoman territory of Transylvania. While out on a scouting mission in the woods with Shkelj and his men, Vlad discovers a Turkish helmet washed up in a creek and deduces that a scouting party of Turks have entered Transylvanian territory.
Came from up there.
Figuring it to have come from Broken Tooth Mountain, Dimitru argues against Vlad negotiating with them but is sent back to the castle to fortify defenses in case of an attack. Vlad takes 2 men up the mountain to search for the foreign party, and comes across a cave in the side of the mountain where a swarm of bats fly out into the sunlight. Not being something bats normally do unless frightened, they enter the cave assuming that the Turks have set up a camp inside. But they soon realize that the ground they are walking on is littered with the crushed bones of vanquished soldiers, not being something the Turks are known for doing. They suddenly encounter an ancient vampire that drives them out of its lair, killing his men but stopping when Vlad himself reaches the sunlight. Noticing that the creature's blood disintegrates under the light, Vlad returns to his castle defeated as the master vampire backs away. When reaching his castle, Vlad is told everything that the church knows about it by Brother Lucian, that it is a human curse to live in that cave until it can pass its curse on to another desperate enough to accept it. Vlad is shown to be a devoted father and husband, with a child about the same age that he was when the Turks took him, with his wife Marina, who he just gives the impression to that he was attacked by wolves. The following day Vlad and his subjects hold an Easter celebration, where they toast to 10 years of peace and prosperity under their lord's leadership. Just then an envoy of Turkish soldiers arrive unexpectedly, being led by Hamza Bey, with 2 men taken from their homelands as children, Bright Eyes and Asimi. Anticipating that they have come for a tribute to the Sultan, Vlad offers silver coins but the envoy turns it down. Hamza suspects that the Impaler still resides inside Vlad and that he has killed a battalion of missing Turkish troops. He does the old fake walkaway, then demands that 1,000 boys be given over for service in the Ottoman Empire. Vlad turns down the request, but knows that he lacks a large enough armed force to compel the Turks to leave Transylvania in peace. He assures his son and Jaraz that he would never give him up, and his wife reminds him that he was once like a brother to the Sultan. So the next morning Vlad puts on his Impaler armor, and rides into the Turkish camp, being gawked at by the troops like a person of legend. He enters the Sultan's tent in an attempt at diplomacy with Mehmed the Conqueror, who has no need for his offer of service and instead now demands 1,001. Telling Vlad that his son will be raised in the Sultan's palace just like him. Vlad meets Marina on the road with some Turkish soldiers and she pleads with him not to give their child away to the Ottomans, but Jaraz agrees to go, to calm the situation. When face to face with Hamza, Vlad makes a reckless decision to cut off his hands, before skirmishing with the party and slaughtering the entire lot solo. Realizing that he will need more power in order to defend his territory from the retaliation that will surely follow, Vlad seeks out the one thing he knows to be good at killing Turks, the monster of Broken Tooth Mountain. He reaches the now harder to get to than last time cave, and enters to ask for the vampire's power to help protect his lands. It remembers Vlad's smell and is surprised by the only person to ever return, possibly also being the only one to ever escape in the first place. So he reveals himself, saying that most smell of fear when they enter but Vlad smells of hope. The Transylvanian tells his story but says he has killed hundreds of men, getting caught in a lie by the all-knowing creature, being that it's really in the thousands. The vampire warns Vlad of what he asks for, saying that he has no idea what it really is to be a monster. But it agrees, having waited an eternity for someone of his strength to pass the curse on to. Giving Vlad the strength of 100 men, the speed of a falling star, dominion over the night and all its creatures, and the ability to heal grievous wounds. The vampire offers Vlad a drink of his blood and explains that the power will last for 3 days, during which time he will be tempted to drink human blood himself. If he can withstand the urge for all 3 days, he will be restored to his human form. If not, the vampire will be free to leave the cave and Vlad will forever be his slave to darkness. Sounding good, Vlad drinks the monster's blood and begins his transformation, by first dying. He wakes up presumably having been thrown into the river by the vampire, and finds that he is now allergic to silver. He crushes a rock under his weight and heals a wound in seconds, receiving just a taste of the abilities that the cave vamp possesses. The Ottoman Empire begin their siege on Castle Dracula, when heightened hearing and night vision begin to kick in for Vlad, and the ability to turn into a swarm of bats to traverse faster. Upon his return from the cave, Vlad tells his family and the rest of his people to stay inside, determined to protect them at all costs. He single-handedly faces the besieging force. He uses his speed and strength to run through the soldiers, slicing through the entire army while using his bat form to evade any strikes. Without having any silver or bottles of sunlight, the Ottoman force is slowly withered away. With Dumitru and the rest of his army deciding that now is the time to help, Vlad instructs them to fall back to a mountain monastery whose geography will hinder any attempt to invade again. Word makes it back to Mehmed that Vlad has defeated 1,000 of his men, and he sees them impaled on wooden spikes above the battlefield, so he sends in 100,000. During a meal, Vlad begins to get hungry but is disinterested in food, and experiences the thirst for the first time when he almost bites Marina but resists.
Sorry.
He is then confronted by Shkeljm in the woods, having been keeping an eye on him. Knowing the stories of what dwells in the mountain, he offers Vlad his blood in service. But the vampire refuses to drink blood and give in to the curse, so Shkeljm slinks away, calling him master. The next day, Marina discovers Vlad's secret, as he explains it away as a necessary evil to protect her and their son. So she takes the party of Transylvanians to the monastery while Vlad waits for the sun to set. But they get discovered by Bright Eyes and a scouting party of Turkish forces, who ambush the people while the sun finally sets. Dumitru tries to get Vlad's family to the monastery but is cut off by the Ottoman assassin, as Vlad shows up and begins to slaughter the Turkish soldiers. Dumitru goes at the much faster killer but is instantly cut down, just as Vlad gets to them and startles Bright Eyes off a cliff, but he manages to hold on and survives. The next day at the monastery, Vlad attempts to rally his people ahead of the battle, but his aversion to sunlight is noticed by Lucian. The holy man confronts Vlad with a silver sword, knowing that he mustn't have fed yet since the crosses don't have any effect on him. Vlad's demonic powers are exposed when Lucian cuts away the tent wall, burning Vlad's skin with the sun. So the citizens at the monastery subsequently turn on their prince, saying that the devil lives within him and burning a building down with him inside. But he simply walks out. Angered over their betrayal, Vlad chastises his people for not appreciating all he has done for them, then tells them to get back to work. That night, Vlad prays for the strength to endure the final day of the curse, and a massive Ottoman force marches on the monastery, all blindfolded and marching in blind service of Mehmed. As they approach the fortress, Vlad employs bats hiding in the monastery to defend his territory. He controls the massive swarm with hand movements to wipe out hundreds of Turkish troops. Vlad notices the Sultan's vulnerable and tries to end it quickly. However, the entire incoming army turns out to be just a decoy force, deployed to allow Bright Eyes and Asimi to infiltrate the monastery. They defeat Vlad's captain together, leaving only Marina to defend her son, but she is knocked down as Bright Eyes kidnaps Angeras. Vlad bursts into his bat form and makes it back in time to kill Asimi, then tries to make it to the falling Marina before she hits the ground but fails, as Mehmed takes Vlad's child to be raised as his own. As Vlad mourns, he lets the army invade the monastery and slaughter all those defiant who remain. Angered over the loss of his wife, Vlad embraces the darkness within himself and honors Marina's last request to drink her blood, knowing that it will be needed if he is to save their son. The curse is passed on to Vlad of the House Dracula, and the master vampire is able to finally leave his cave as color returns to his cheeks. The new master returns to the monastery and finds Captain Petru bleeding out, so he offers him the chance for revenge, which he accepts with a drink of Dracula's blood. After his advisor Kazan, 3 brides, and a handful of other survivors accept the same deal, Dracula dons his family's dragon armor for the first time since he was called the Impaler. At the primary Turkish army camp, the Sultan and his men are preparing for a massive invasion of Europe, when Vlad begins to use his new sorcery to terrify the masses with darkness. The band of vampires show up with all the same powers Vlad had before his ascension, and a battle erupts between the two forces. However, the vastly superior vampires quickly degenerate the battle into a massacre, with Dumitru's killer Bright Eyes being fed by Dracula to one of his minions. While the vampires take their vengeance on the Turkish forces, Drake seeks out the Sultan, but aware of the vampire's weakness to silver, he has lined the floors of his tent with silver coins and dangled moneybags from the roof. The two engage in a battle, but with the silver around him, the vampire is weakened, eventually not being able to stand the pain and being defeated by Mehmed. Before the Sultan can stake Dracula through the heart, he still gets enough juice out of his silver-suppressed powers to burst into a swarm of bats and stab his old friend through his armor, following it up by draining his blood for good measure. With the Sultan defeated, Dracula leaves victorious with his son to nothing but vampires and the entire Ottoman army dead. They are approached by Kazan, who demands to drink Anjera's blood as all humans are now their enemies, and they begin to get surrounded by the hungry crowd. So the Impaler reminds them what his name is, sticking Kazan with a pike through the heart and displaying him as a warning. But with the vampires still hungry, they are all stopped by the unexpected presence of Lucian, who keeps the vampires at bay with a cross since they have all fed. After consoling his son, Vlad instructs the monk to take Angeras away and keep him safe, then uses his powers to clear the cloud coverage above them, having given the vampires the revenge he promised. The absence of clouds results in the death of the vampires as they all burst into ashes, except for Dracula, who looks at his son, then drops to the ground, just being presumed dead. But that night Skeldrum revives his master with blood to serve as his first Renfield. With the Turkish army defeated and all of Europe now safe from invasion, Angeres is crowned the new Prince of Transylvania, and the name Dracula is passed down as a legend. In the present day, the immortal Transylvanian walks down a street and notices that a woman bears a striking resemblance to Marina. He approaches her and compliments her flowers, introducing himself as Vlad, as she introduces herself as Mina. Vlad recites her favorite piece of poetry seemingly by coincidence, and the two depart together. The master vampire watches their enjoyment from a distance, and follows after them saying, "Let the games begin." And the movie ends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.